And he stayed underwater for 1.5 minutes. Everybody else was gasping for breath after 15, 20, 25 seconds. So they had the rehearsal, and they were going to do it for real. And everybody joined in.
All right, let's do it. And take a breath and go down, and they would say to themselves, wow, he just did it as long as I did it, and longer. And now suddenly he just took a quick gulp of air, and then he went back inside.
The lid went on, the 6 locks were secured, the canvas cabinet was put around the churn. All the while, there he was in the milk churn. They were blasting out through the auditorium, asleep in the deep. It became a very visceral experience for everybody sitting there watching.
And there they sat. I mean, just watching a curtain. Can you imagine? Sitting there watching a curtain while the music played, getting more and more and more terrified that the chap was actually going to die.
And of course, you could hear the gasps of relief in the auditorium as people ran out of air. And the clock ticked away 1 minute, 2 minutes. Where was Houdini?
And of course, they'd all let out that breath and realized, wow, I would now be drowning.
3 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 second, and he came through the curtain, a bedraggled wreck of a man, exhausted, having gone through the superhuman endurance test.
What had happened was he'd got out immediately and he'd sat behind the curtain, you know, waiting while the time passed and the people sweated.
We do hear the story that behind the screen, that he would be actually reading a newspaper, and they'd tell him, don't make too much noise turning the pages of the newspaper. I can't quite imagine Harry Houdini reading a newspaper while sitting on top of the milk can. Knowing as much as I do about his character, I think he was probably thinking, how good am I going to look when I walk through that curtain? Unless the newspaper had an article about him, in which case he might be reading it very carefully.
But this sort of act isn't as easy as Houdini made it look, as Robert Gallup once discovered when performing his own version of the milk can escape.
Still to this day, my spin on Houdini's milk can escape scares the hell out of me. My hazardous drum escape is probably not the most spectacular escape I've ever done, but by far, I kid you not, by far the most dangerous I've ever done.
Stop.
The only time I've ever freaked out was inside of these steel drums. I started doing the escape sequence, and I know what I have to do in what order, and all of a sudden, for some stupid reason, I went out of sequence. I mean, I had a problem with one of my handcuffs. I figured, okay, well, I'll skip that and go on to the next element that I have to get to. And then, of course, I couldn't do the next element because I hadn't done the previous one, except I wasn't figuring out why I hadn't done that one. And it didn't occur to me, well, it's because I didn't do the one before. And all of a sudden, these 2 walls just crammed in on me, and it was like a physical barrier, and it was panic. I only got 1 breath in my mouth, and I'm thinking I'm like out of air, and I am like minutes away, probably by that 1.5 minutes away from actually getting air. And I'm like freaking. And I just had to compose myself, bring it in, and say, okay, I know I can get out of here. And I calm myself down just enough where I can get through the sequence. And I was able to get out. But it freaked me out. I wouldn't do that escape for several months after that. It was in my live show, and I said, that's out of the show, man. It's just too freaky. And finally, I got back into it, and I've done it several times since. But still, to this day, it is the scariest thing I've ever done.
Houdini's escapes were usually meticulously planned, but on one occasion, he too had a very close shave with death.
He nearly did come unstuck once when he had himself buried alive in earth.
Literally underground, 6 feet underground, with no protection. Literally with the soil in immediate contact with him.
Houdini tried it at one time and he said he would never do it again.
He didn't realize that the weight of the earth above him was so considerable that even with his strength, he couldn't push it away, he couldn't free himself.
He got earth in his mouth. He wasn't able to scream out. He just managed to get to the surface in time.
He got scared to death doing it. I think he decided that that was too dangerous to do, to be buried that way.
The primal fear of being buried alive had a strong grip over the human imagination in the 19th century, when it was commonly believed that many victims were accidentally buried alive every year.
Victorians were completely obsessed with the idea. Special devices were made that you could ring a bell to indicate that you were alive in your coffin if you were buried, and sold en masse to people. It just keys into so many natural fears. It's a great appeal to the audience. The idea of being trapped in the coffin after death, you know, that to wake up and find yourself in the coffin is the ultimate primal fear, I think, that people want to know, if I'm dead, I'm really dead. So when Houdini and people like that came along and said, a buried alive escape, it really caught people's imaginations.
I believe at that time, when he was considering doing the buried alive stunt, that there had been several examples of people being interred actually alive before embalming was insisted upon by the authorities. And I'm sure that that was part of the impetus for him doing a stunt like this.
The truth is, it's a really, really dangerous trick.
As Alan Allen discovered when he attempted his own premature burial in 1949, this is one escape that's all too easy to underestimate.
And attempt an escape from the one thing Houdini said made escape impossible, the grave.
No box, my hands were tied. I was put in this grave, which I incidentally had to dig myself.
The grave is filled in.
I could hear the talking slowly being muffled as more and more earth came in, and then it went quite silent.
6 feet and half a ton of earth, its weight increased by the dampness, are between escape man Allen and the cool November air.
As I'm starting to claw through, I hear clump, clump, bump, bump. My agent at the time was overly enthusiastic, and they stamped the earth down to make a neat and tidy package. And it crushed me. And luckily I had a safety line, a string that I was to pull.
Dig him out is the order, and the shovels begin to fly again. They got to work fast to avert disaster. 2 feet down, bare hands have to take over, for the shovels may hurt the man whose escape bid went wrong. "38 minutes after setting out on what he promised would be the world's greatest escape, Alan Allen is free, alive and sound. But only just."
Things go wrong. Things go wrong all the time. There's almost that sort of sense of, to make it more exciting for the audience, you have to endanger your life more and more. And you get to the point where you go, what's the balance here? What's the balance between risking your life for entertainment's sake and making people have a good show?
There was a gentleman who, not too many years ago, wanted to get a reputation like Houdini, and he did the buried alive effect. This fellow did it with wet cement.